Good morning. Delighted to be with you today. I'm traveling, so in a hotel room, not my normal environment, but wanted to make sure to offer some teaching just to create the consistency around these teachings and meditations. So we discussed very early on with these classes about the power, the benefit of consistency as we're trying to build a meditation practice, build a community as well, build our own learning. And so, I wanted to do my part from my side to make sure that we're offering the classes in a consistent way and meditations in a consistent way. The topic that we've been discussing or began discussing this last week is on what's known as the Great Scope in the stages of the path or Lamrim meditation. So this Great Scope deals primarily with developing a good heart, this practice of developing a good heart. Sometimes we think of a good heart as being something that someone has. Oh, she has a really good heart. He has a really good heart. Or I wish I was, I'm just not like that, something like that. But all of these things can be cultivated. Of course, maybe we have a genetic predisposition towards something, but especially the way we were raised, these things influence our behavior a lot. But these minds can be cultivated. A mind of good heart can be cultivated, no question. Just in part because our mind is changing every moment already. So whether you like it or not, whether you're trying or not, you're already changing. So developing a good heart is just changing intentionally, applying a little bit of effort to change in a particular way. So the minds that we're trying to develop, broadly, we can describe them as two: love and compassion. And love broadly means wanting others to be happy. Compassion broadly means wanting others to be free from suffering. So this is what it means. We have this wish towards ourselves all the time. We always want ourselves to be happy. We always want ourselves to be free from suffering. Developing a good heart means developing the exact same wish for others. One way to think about this means we're just keeping the exact same wish we already have, the wish for happiness, the wish to be free from suffering, but we're stopping discriminating or distinguishing whose happiness or whose freedom, or at least either completely stopping or reducing that discrimination in some way. So we know that there's this progression from being utterly self-centered to being concerned about one being, like your pet. A pet is often the gateway to becoming a parent. For example, you get a pet first, or maybe you get a plant first, and then you get a pet, and then you have a child. But people often have incredible amounts of love for their pets, and pets are very interesting because they function as a kind of a social transmitter, like a social, like a fluid that connects people. You can walk up to somebody and say, "Oh, your dog is so pretty. Can I pet your dog?" You say that to somebody's child, you get a very strange look. I haven't tried it, but don't say that to somebody's child. But animals, you can pet other people's dogs. You can let them lick you. There's this sort of sharing of affection, even among strangers, right? In a household, having an animal in the household helps to sort of spread this atmosphere of love and warmth and so forth, where humans may sometimes have a contentious relationship, be disagreeing about some human thing, about, this is important or that's not important. And humans can get into a lot of conceptual disagreements. Animals are just very basic. They're just very, and they've got that same strong emotional quality that humans have. They want to be part of a pack. They want to be part of a group. If it's a dog or some other animals, cats, may want attention, may want affection, even if they're not as much pack creatures. But we understand this idea of extending our concern from just ourselves to a pet, to another person, to our family, to our company, to our country, maybe, or our state. Maybe you like the state, you distrust the country, or to all the humans in the world, or even to all of the humans, animals in the world, and to the natural ecosystem, or maybe to whatever living beings there may be, seen or unseen, near or far, this world, some other world, I don't know. Wherever there is a mind, wherever there is a living being, I'm concerned about them. As you can see, is quite a progression, right? To go from just me to my family, my community, my company, my state, my country, my species, all of those are oriented around you, right? It's my state, not your state. It's my family, not your family. So there's still, as you can see, it's still a self-centeredness often in the natural love and concern that we have. It's still often very focused on ourselves, right? It's still the center of focus of who should we be concerned with. Now, why? It often feels like a reasonable balance to have that concern because of trust. Who can we trust? Well, I can trust my pet. I know my pet's not going to hurt me, hopefully. But maybe you don't trust other humans as much. Humans can say things that hurt us or offend us in ways that animals can't, right? So that's why sometimes people are more comfortable around pets or animals than humans, It's a lack of trust. Or you trust your family, but you don't necessarily trust somebody else's family. Or you don't trust that if you would, or there can be a judiciousness, thinking I have a finite amount of time, a finite amount of energy. I can't share my time and energy equally. But that's actually not what we're talking about. There's a bit of a difference between the practical decision of how we spend our time and the general emotional attitude of how we feel towards others. So even someone who has universal love and compassion, concern for all living beings, equally, from a pragmatic point of view, we are one person. We have one finite amount of time and energy and skills, and we need to be pragmatic about where we spend that. So still appropriate for us to perhaps spend more time, even perhaps more time on our plans than other people's plans, because we clearly understand our plans and we have maybe committed to executing them. So you can be very focused on, very goal-oriented, very focused on fulfilling your plans, even if you have a supreme good heart of love and concern for everybody else. So you can see there's a bit of a difference between where we spend our energy and what we think is important and who we think is important. You can think everyone is important, everything is important, but you can still think from a practical point of view, I'm going to focus more on my plans, or looking after my family, or working for my company, or helping in my country, and no contradiction between those two minds. So this is what we mean by these increasing scopes of concern. Now, as you know, somebody who's only concerned about themselves, as I mentioned, we often orient around how much we trust others. Do we trust our family? Do we trust our country? Maybe we don't trust other countries. Maybe we don't trust other people from different cultures that we don't know. The question, part of the question is, can they trust us? So should we trust them? Should they trust us? So the only reason someone should trust you is if you have good motivation towards them and don't have any harmful motivation. Now, the reality is that our motivations vary, and for as long as we are self-centered, then we are primarily concerned for ourselves or our family, whatever, and we're not as concerned for others. And so we may not be concerned to avoid hurting them. We may not be that concerned if we cause them problems. We may not be that concerned if they're happy or unhappy. So that's what we're talking about. An indifference, sort of a callous indifference versus a care, as opposed to where we're spending our time and energy. I hope I haven't confused you there. So our focus in developing a good heart is to overcome our attitudes of indifference towards others and replace them with an attitude of love and compassion. Concern for them to be happy, concern for them to be free from suffering. It doesn't necessarily change our outer behavior. So we're developing a good heart, not necessarily changing what we're doing, how we're spending our time, and so forth. So hopefully that's clear. There's a saying, remain natural while changing your aspiration. So as your aspiration changes, as your wishes, as your goals change, for example, you're developing the aspiration to develop a good heart. That's a new aspiration. You're changing your aspiration. You want to have a good heart. You want to be somebody who cares about everybody. You want to be somebody who is not indifferent. You don't want to be someone who is indifferent. While you're going through that change, remain natural. Don't act strange. Even if you have universal love and compassion, it doesn't mean that you should be trying to hug or kiss everybody necessarily. Right? Be thoughtful about how you behave. Like this difference between petting people's dogs and petting people's children. Right? There's social. We need to be mindful of these social norms and respect them. Developing a good heart. I said in a previous class, oftentimes people have the impression that everyone says you should be a good person, you shouldn't be a bad person, but nobody tells you how to do that. So there are in fact ways to learn how to be a good person, learn how to have a good heart, learn how to be more compassionate. And that's what we're doing, focusing on this learning. So there are 5 minds that we want to cultivate. And 3 of them are minds of love, 3 different kinds of love. Affectionate love, cherishing love, wishing love. The 4th is the mind of compassion, which, as I mentioned, is the mind wishing others to be free from suffering. Why are there 3 kinds of love but only 1 kind of compassion? Is love more important? No. Compassion is built on love. So these 3 kinds of love, affectionate love, this is the first of these practices, developing a warm heart and a feeling of closeness to others. The second of these kinds of love is cherishing love. That means regarding others as very precious, very important. Now, affectionate love and cherishing love are the foundation for the 3rd and 4th minds. The 3rd mind, wishing love, means because you cherish others, you want them to be happy. And that's what I mentioned, love is a wish for others to be happy. So because you cherish them, you want them to be happy. Cherishing love is also the foundation for compassion. So because you cherish others, you want them to be free from suffering. So because you cherish others, you have two wishes, love and compassion. Love, wishing them to be happy, compassion, wishing them to be free from suffering. And the 5th of these minds, these good heart minds, is what's known as the mind of bodhicitta. This is an interesting mind, and this mind is it is specifically a Buddhist mind. So this is a Buddhist version of this training in love and compassion. Of course, love and compassion are not explicitly or exclusively Buddhist minds. They're natural minds. Everyone has these, and many religions, as far as I know, all religions or most religions, teach people how they can build their love and compassion, or encourage those minds at least. But bodhicitta is a special mind that is specifically Buddhist. You can tell because it has this word bodhi in it. Bodhi literally means awakened or enlightened. Same root word as Buddha. Bodhi means awakened, and citta just literally means mind of enlightenment, mind of awakening. And bodhicitta is specifically a mind that wants to become enlightened to benefit others. And one way to think about this is to think that, let's say you wanted to become a doctor. Why? I once applied to medical school. I didn't take it very far, but when you apply to medical school, they ask you this good question. They say, why do you want to be a doctor? because your motivation for that is extraordinarily important. You need to first of all, you need to have a solid, strong, sustained motivation. Second of all, it needs to be a good motivation, a benevolent motivation. I want to be a doctor because they make a ton of money. And, I've got a feeling that when people put that on their medical school application, it's viewed with some suspiciousness, because you want people who have a legitimate benevolent motivation. Maybe they also want to make money, but so the motivation that you have makes you want to develop new skills, develop new capabilities, increase your capacity to help. Right now, because I didn't go to medical school, my capacity to offer medical assistance is very limited. So I don't have the knowledge that I need. I've taken a couple of CPR classes a couple of times. I'm quite rusty. I don't know if I could pull off CPR. I would try, but my knowledge is too rusty, so I'm not that helpful in a medical emergency. I'm not that helpful if somebody has a serious medical issue. But if I had developed this strong determination to become a doctor, to help others, then I would have that ability. So why am I mentioning this? When we talk about bodhicitta, bodhicitta is a mind that wishes to become enlightened for the benefit of others. So imagine applying to enlightenment school, and they say, well, why do you want to become enlightened? And you say, well, to make a lot of money. Clearly, you haven't read much about enlightened people. Buddha lived with no money in the forest, so it's not necessarily a very lucrative career option to be enlightened. So why would you want to become enlightened? Because of having a good heart. Now, we know how doctors help people, right? They offer medical advice and so forth. We know how hard it is to become a doctor. It takes many, many years of study. So how do enlightened people help others? And how hard or easy is it to attain enlightenment? It's a word. You can say, he's more enlightened, she's more enlightened. But what does it really mean? Obviously, we'll get into that in much more detail later, but basically, being enlightened simply means that we have fully understood how to work with the mind. We have an incredible, unbelievable finesse and skill in working with the mind. And that means, which mind? Well, it's our mind. We learn how to become enlightened by watching our own mind, learning our own mind, developing skill in our own mind, learning how to make ourselves happy, learning how to not be miserable ourselves, overcome our own jealousy, cravings, anxiety, and so this sort of inner journey of spiritual maturity, learning how to work with our own mind. This is what someone who has attained enlightenment has mastered, this skill, this moment by moment finesse. And because of that, they're always a good influence on others. Now, I know we like to think that we're always a good influence on others, but that's not necessarily exactly the case. We always influence each other, right? Everybody's influencing each other all the time, moment by moment. You can't help when you form a friendship with someone else. There is a flow of beliefs, there's a flow of feelings, there's a flow of shared activities. So we influence each other for better or for worse. This world needs good influences. Am I right? This world needs wise influences. It doesn't matter who they are, it doesn't matter where they are, but we need as many of them as we can get, and we need them to be as wise and beneficial as they can possibly be. Critically important for our society, for our world, that we populate the world with wise people who are good influences. Right now, our world, obviously it's just the way I'm seeing things, maybe I'm wrong, but my initial impression of this world is that it is populated by people who are not as wise as they need to be. We are, and we can look at ourselves as example number one. We can look at the people around us who suffer, right, because of our craving. We crave things that are not good for us. Is that true? We find it hard to control our own attention. We find it hard to. That's why you're attending a meditation class. You're like, I really should learn how to meditate so I can learn how to control my attention better and stop being so distracted and agitated and anxious. We know it's hard for us to maintain our own inner peace. Our minds of inner peace are disturbed all the time. It's hard for us to interact with others in a close way without becoming upset ourselves or agitating them or angry or jealous. There's a lot of mental disturbance that we're dealing with in ourselves and others and so forth. So we need to become enlightened so that we can be the best possible influence on our world. And that's interesting, that's subtle. And you can become enlightened and also become a doctor if you want. You can become enlightened, you can also be a manager in an organization or a farmer, or you can be a parent or pet owner, or you can be whatever you want. You can be a yoga instructor, whatever you want. You can be all those jobs and enlightened. What's the difference between being a farmer who's enlightened and a farmer who's not enlightened? The difference is that if you're a farmer who's enlightened, every single person that you come in contact with will benefit from your influence. Every single person, whether they know it or not, whether you even speak any words or not, they will get some sense, right? This person's very peaceful, right? I just feel a bit more calm when I'm around this person. They seem kind. They seem happy. They seem relaxed. You want to be that person, right? You want to be that enlightened person skillfully navigating all these crazy, crazy, crazy world, right? You want to have that finesse, not just for yourself, but you want to have that for the sake of others. And that's bodhicitta. That's this fifth good heart, right? A long explanation to explain. So these five: affectionate love, cherishing love. So today, there's a long preamble, but I want to talk about affectionate love. Affectionate love, we can understand this is a mind that is best described as a warm heart and a feeling of closeness to others. A warm heart and a feeling of closeness. Warm heart. Is that just a poetic term? Haven't you ever felt warm heart, right? You relax, and you if you're a pet owner, sorry to keep coming back to this. If you're a pet owner, you relax, you're on the couch, and your pet comes up to you, cuddles up next to you and wants a pet. Or your child comes up to you and wants a pet, or somebody is really kind to you and you're like, wow, people are really nice. And there's a softening, right? There's an inner softening. Maybe normally we're a little bit, cold and rigid and so forth, feeling a bit distant, a little cautious about our interactions with others. Under some circumstances, we relax a little bit and we feel a warm heart. And interestingly, when we feel that warm heart, that's the physiological internal experience of affectionate love. That feeling of a warm heart, that's the physiological internal experience of a warm heart, of affectionate love, sorry. But affectionate love is a warm heart and a feeling of closeness to others. So it's interesting, there's two aspects. There's a physiological, there's the felt aspect, and there's the sociological, to use a fancy word. There's the social aspect, feeling of closeness. So literally it is the opposite of a feeling of distance. So that implies if you don't have affectionate love, you don't have a feeling of closeness, that means you have a feeling of distance from others. So even the analogy I used, your pet crawls up on your couch with you, there was a distance between you and your pet, and now there's a feeling of closeness. Warm heart, a feeling of closeness. Or your child comes, your partner comes, or someone approaches you and is kind to you. they were normally distant and they come up to you and, hey, you look great today, or hey, you did a great job with that presentation, or hey, I really appreciate what you said the other day. And you're like, wow. And you feel closer to that person, right? What's happened? Space has disappeared. Space between us has disappeared. Now, why are they taught together, right? Why are these two, why do they go together? Warm heart and feeling of closeness. What, can you have a warm heart but no feeling of closeness to others? Got a warm heart, stay away. Got a warm heart, I'm not interested in anybody else. Warm heart, all here by myself, right? You can be happy all by yourself. You can be enjoying things, but there's something a little bit qualitatively different about this mind of affectionate love. It is necessarily a social mind. It's necessarily something that is about your connections with others. So which comes first, the feeling of closeness or the warm heart? Well, neither comes first. They go together, really. If somebody comes close to you but you don't like them, that's not a comfortable feeling. That's not a warm heart. That's not the feeling of closeness we're talking about. You don't feel close. You feel like there's someone distant from you that you don't want to be close to. Coming close, that's uncomfortable, right? It's only when we feel that gap or that distance between ourselves and others is starting to close that we feel that sense of distance. That we feel that warm heart. When the distance closes, we feel that sense of warm heart. Now, interestingly, you can close that distance between yourself and others wherever you are. I'm alone here in my hotel room. There's no one here. If I think about my parents, my friends, my family, people who've been kind to me, people who I'm concerned about, I feel close to them just by thinking about them. But you can be in the same room as somebody and you can feel distant from them. That coldness, that awkwardness, that tension, like if you had a fight with a partner or you're with a group of people that you don't know very well, there's a feeling of distance even if you're in the same place. So we're not talking about physical closeness or distance. We're talking about mental, emotional closeness. Now, when early on when I said, we feel close to our pet or our family or our community and so forth, these are, in a sense, what's happening then is we're creating a group where we're creating a we instead of an I. If I join a club or an organization or I find a friend, then all of a sudden me and the friend, we're a we. We went to the movies, we went to dinner, we went on a walk. So the language changes, but language is logic to a great degree. Like our conceptions of the world are formed by language. When we shift from I and you to we, what's happening is it's like two water drops touching and coalescing into one water drop. You know how that is? Like just, then all of a sudden these two drops connect and they become one drop. And you cease to discriminate between them. Now, conservation of mass, right? Is still just the same volume of water. There's still two bodies. They weigh as much as they once did. They have the same number of thoughts and feelings that they once did. But once they become a we, then they become a one. They become one. No, not inseparably one. We can go different ways. We can get closer and more distant and so forth. But this is what we mean when we're talking about affectionate love and a feeling of closeness. It's coming closer to that sense of unity, connection. There's some relationship. How do we develop affectionate love? There are two methods. One is by understanding our relationship with others in a new way. So there's a redefining of our relationship between self and others. And the other is redefining of ourself in the context of others, meditating on others' kindness. What do I mean when I say redefining our relationship with others? Feeling that we are related to others already, right? So if you think about your mother or someone who's been very kind to you, there is a feeling of closeness because you feel we are connected. There's natural connection. We have, in fact, come entirely from our mother's body. Some contribution from our father, fair enough. But after these initial germ cells formed our body, then all of the blood, the food, the moisture and nourishment and so forth that formed this baby came from our mother's body, literally formed from her body, from her eating food, goes into her bloodstream. Her bloodstream then nourishes, enriches us. The placental cord carries that motherly blood, and then it soaks into this little embryonic body that we have, and that embryonic body grows with these nutrients, and then becomes fully formed. And then our mother continues to breastfeed us for a period of time. We're still formed, physically, literally formed from our mother's body, and then formed from food initially sourced from our parents and from others, but the food that has further grown this body, and the food of ideas that has grown us, nourished us intellectually and so forth, this has all come from others. So we have a special connection with our parents. We have a special connection with our family, but there's a bond of identity. Like when I mentioned we make a friendship, all of a sudden there are two people who are distant and then they become close, right? Or if we're traveling, and then if I'm traveling in a strange country and then I meet you and you're an American, and I'm like, oh, you're American, I'm American too, where are you from? And you say, I'm from Ohio, and I say, I'm from California. We have so much in common, right? I've heard of Ohio, right? Like, I visited California. And we can become great friends, right? Because we feel there's some identity, some shared identity. It's totally just an idea, right? Totally just an idea that we're similar because we share, oh, I was an engineer. Oh, you're an engineer too? Ah, that's amazing. So just changing our mind, our way of thinking, our way of understanding about things can generate a feeling of closeness. You were in the military too? Wow. We've got so much in common, right? There's a connection there. Do you have anything in common with anybody else? Who do you have anything in common with? Depends on how you think about yourself. If you think about yourself as so different, nobody could possibly understand you. You know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of when teenagers fall in love and they're going through this agony, the agony of falling in love, angst, worrying, does somebody like me or not like me? And their parents come to them and they're like, why are you so upset? You'll find somebody else. Don't worry about this. And what do you say to them? You say, you'll never understand. You could never understand what I'm going through. Of course, because you're feeling like your parents are so different. They've never, been in a relationship. They've never fallen in love. They've never wanted somebody who didn't want them. Ridiculous. They've been through all that stuff, right? Your parents have been through all the stuff you've been through, more or less, give or take, right? We're all in this mess together, right? It's a common experience. It's a common human experience. What you're tasting, what you're living, your life is exactly the same stuff other people have gone through. That's why you go to the movies. You go to the movies to see somebody else's story and how similar it is to yours, right? You're like, I really feel inspired. I feel encouraged. I feel more courageous now that I've gone to that movie because I saw somebody else's story written by somebody I've never met, acted by people I've never met, written by somebody I've never met, totally unfamiliar scenario, and I related to it so deeply because I know exactly how it feels to be ignored by everybody else, and then all of a sudden to have the courage to speak up and speak your mind, and everybody, agrees, and you're like, you leave that movie, and you're like, I'm going to be so confident now because we're all in this together. Our stories, our human stories, basically the same, one person to another. So we're all part of this ocean of humanity, right? It's like I've said this before. It's like pulling a ladle of humanity out of this great ocean, or a ladle of being a living being out of this great ocean of life. That's one way to feel a sense of affection and warmth, and realizing, oh man, we're all in the same boat together. The better you get to know yourself, the more you get to know your fears, your anxieties, your likes, your dislikes, your anger, your jealousy, and the more you begin to realize, I'm exactly the same as everybody else. If you wait long enough, you'll see every single mind that's ever been experienced by a human being. They'll all pass through your mind eventually. Homicidal rage, universal compassion, brotherly love, boredom. They're all, like Shakespeare said, all the world's stage, and all the men and women merely players, making their entrances and exits. Similarly, our mind is a stage, and all of these minds are just players, making their entrances and exits. And on the stage of our mind, in the stage of our experience, all of these minds come over time. You wait long enough. You wait long enough, you'll be humbled. This is part of the teaching of karma. Like, nobody escapes. If you harm others, one day you'll be harmed in a similar way. You wait long enough. We go through all of these experiences of being on the giving end of causing harm, being on the receiving end of causing harm, being on the giving end of kindness, being on the receiving end of kindness. So one way to develop this warm heart and feeling of closeness is changing the way we view the world, thinking of ourselves in a different way. Another way, second way, is reflecting on how much we've received from others. Right now, I'm sitting in a hotel room. It's clean. Somebody cleaned this room. It's nice bedding. Somebody created the bedding, bought the bedding, made the room, carried this bed up the stairs or up the elevator down the hall, put it in this room, painted the walls, wallpapered, fixed the thermostat, fixed the lights. It's been an enormous amount of work to create this space that I'm living in. I have no idea who did it, but I'm benefiting in some way from having a stable, safe place. There's a door, a lock on it. I feel safe. I can rest. I can sleep deeply, not having to be exposed or at risk. There's food we've got access to. So when we think about the kindness of others, we start with our parents, like I was saying earlier, being looked after, nourished by our mother's body, looked after by countless others. All the farmers in the world, every calorie of food we've ever consumed has come from a farmer someplace. Even all the junk food still originally came from corn farmed by someplace, came from the earth, came from insects under the ground, opening up the soil, plants, and so forth. Our body, when we do a breathing meditation, normally people do breathing meditation a little bit kind of just without much intelligence, without much wisdom, right? Breathing meditation, when you're doing your breathing, realizing there's a lot of wisdom you can get just by breathing, realizing every breath in and out, this is reflecting this body that has been produced from others' kindness. There's nothing in this body. I have not, obviously some people have, but I have not farmed one day in my life. Not one day in my life have I farmed. But yet every cell in my body is produced from calories that I've consumed, and every single calorie and all the nutrients and so forth that come from farmers someplace, right? Our body's totally dependent on others. Our feelings, all of our happiness, the things we enjoy come from others. Our intellectual understanding, everything we've learned has come from others. The opportunity we have to listen to, read teachings, look at videos, get trained, get a formal education, meet other people who can help us to understand new things. All of that's come through the kindness of others. Our spiritual teachings have been handed down through generations. So these teachings that I'm giving here, they've come from 2,600 years of practitioners learning, practicing, transmitting, sharing these ideas on how to develop a good heart. So we're extraordinarily lucky. We are benefiting enormously from this our birthright, this infinite amount of kindness that is manifesting in your being here right now. Right, you're living a miracle right now, and that miracle is not just a spontaneous miracle, and it's not coming because you're so special. The miracle is coming because others are so kind. So when we reflect on this, when we reflect on the kindness of others, we don't feel distant. I don't feel distant from these farmers. Even though I've never met them, I haven't given anything back to them directly. There's nothing directly that I've ever done to earn that food. Indirectly, I try to work and be a good person, but still, it's very, very my giving back is very, very indirect. But I can feel close, and I can feel humbled, and I can feel that sense of kindness, closeness from others. I can feel a warm heart. I can feel that social distance narrowing between myself and others. I realize I don't know how this world came into existence. I don't know how the things around me were created, who brought them here. But I know that I'm benefiting from that kindness. And so I can feel this warm heart, feeling of closeness. And when that happens, when that warm heart arises, we meditate on it. Now, meditating, it just means savoring it, right? So savoring a warm heart just means enjoying it, right? It's savoring a cup of tea, savoring a bit of food, right? Savoring a nice sunset, savoring a feeling of just sitting and resting on your couch after a hard day of work, right? When we're meditating, we're savoring this feeling. This video is going to end in about a minute or two. Is the feeling at end for you? Does that feeling that you have depend on you watching a particular video? If you're not watching the video, can you sustain the feeling? Where did the feeling come from? I'm not even here, right? You're just looking at a computer. It's just some illusions that have been spun together. You're looking at a computer, I'm not even here, but somehow you've got a feeling of a warm heart. Where's that come from? It's come from your mind. Your mind has that capacity. You've always had this capacity. It's like Dorothy, the Wizard of Oz, click your heels together 3 times, say there's no place like affectionate love. There's no place like affectionate love. There's no place like affectionate love. There's no place like a warm heart and a feeling of closeness. You can use that as a mantra, and that's a great practice. Just say warm heart, feeling of closeness. When you go and meet someone, you just repeat to yourself, warm heart, feeling of closeness. Don't need to act weird. You don't need to hug or kiss or be all mushy or whatever. You can be normal, remain natural while changing your aspiration. Remember that, remain natural while changing your aspiration. But you have a warm heart, a feeling of closeness. You haven't changed your plans. You haven't necessarily disrupted everything else you were doing. You're still, looking after your family, perhaps much more than anybody else's family. That's perfectly fine. But it's not because you're indifferent. It's not because you don't care. You care about everyone. You have a special obligation to your company, say, but you care about everyone, and you're fulfilling your obligation to your family, and you're helping them to develop a warm heart and feeling of closeness. You're fulfilling your obligation to your company, you're helping them to develop a warm heart and feeling of closeness. Your job is to be a good influence, right? Because you're on this path of bodhicitta. You're trying to become a Buddha, an enlightened being, out of compassion. You're trying to have that mind that wants to be the best influence in this world, not be just another self-centered, deluded, anxious person. We've fulfilled our quota of that. Your job is to be a Buddha. Just a normal Buddha, a Buddha who's a yoga teacher, a Buddha who's a farmer, a Buddha who's an engineer, a Buddha who's whatever, Buddha who looks like you, Buddha who's short, Buddha who's tall, male, female, dark skin, light skin, whatever. That's our job, to be an awesome influence in the world, because we have a warm heart and a feeling of closeness to others. So thank you so much. Delighted to have a chance to share these thoughts with you.